Okay, so let's picture this. There's this huge yearly defense bill. Normally, it's important, but maybe not front page news every time. But right now, it's caught up in a really intense political fight, a big one. Today, we're doing a deep dive into that bill, the National Defense Authorization Act, the NDAA, and specifically why its passage has become, well, such a flashpoint. You hear these accusations of woke policies potentially weakening our military.
That's right. And our sources are really highlighting this shift, what used to be pretty much a bipartisan effort. Well, not so much lately. You've got significant pushback, mainly coming from Republicans, based on what we've reviewed.
Yeah.
They're challenging specific provisions, calling them social engineering. The
Yeah.
core argument that these policies are essentially a distraction, pulling focus from the military's #1 job, protecting the nation. And they claim this directly hits combat readiness and recruitment numbers, too, which some sources are painting as dire, like rock bottom.
Okay, so woke policies, social engineering. Let's unpack that a little based on the materials. What specific things are we actually talking about here? What are the key policies igniting this whole debate?
Well, a big one that comes up again and again in the sources is diversity, equity, and inclusion programs, DEI, and also training based on critical race theory, CRT, within the military ranks. Now, CRT, just for context, it's an academic framework looking at systemic racism. But critics argue that putting these programs in the military, even with the goal of inclusion, actually ends up being divisive. They feel it brings in identity politics, and undermines that traditional military focus on unity, on everyone sharing the same mission. We saw quotes like Senator Tom Cotton calling them wild ideas from social experiments.
Okay. So that term social engineering, the sources suggest it's this concern that societal reform agendas are being prioritized over, well, traditional military stuff, like trying to change the military's culture instead of just focusing on its core purpose. Is that the gist?
That seems to be the core of it, yes. And it's not just DEI and CRT. Our materials also point to strong objections around gender ideology policies. Things like taxpayer funding for gender transition procedures or covering travel expenses for abortions for service members.
Right. And the criticisms there.
Well, the critics highlighted in our sources raise questions about resources,
Right.
practical things. Are these policies taking money and attention away from essential military functions? Does it impact readiness? There was also that proposal to extend the draft to women that drew opposition too. Senator Cotton, again, had that "don't draft our daughters" amendment. Even things like controversies over which flags can be flown or reports of drag shows on bases. These are cited as examples that critics find problematic.
It's important, though, to acknowledge, even though our sources today focus heavily on these criticisms, proponents of these policies often have a different take, right? They might argue it actually helps the military.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Proponents often argue these kinds of policies create a more representative force, which can improve morale and, make the military better reflect the diverse nation it defends. Enhancing effectiveness is the argument. But yeah, the materials we reviewed really emphasize the critical perspective, linking these initiatives directly to tangible impacts on military strength.
Okay, so let's talk about those claimed impacts, because the critics aren't just debating ideology, they're pointing to real-world consequences.
Exactly. That's where the conversation gets, well, pretty sharp. Our sources consistently connect these policies to what they describe as a major recruitment crisis, a serious shortfall, and also to a perceived drop in combat readiness. You see quotes like one from Representative Andrew Clyde saying these policies are the real reason that recruiting is at rock-bottom levels. The argument is essentially that these initiatives are damaging the military's soul or its core culture.
Undermining cohesion, lethality, those sorts of terms come up.
They do. And the Biden administration's military vaccine mandate is frequently brought up in these sources too, often cited as a big factor in the low recruitment numbers. The idea being that service members were frustrated by being fired.
Now, just to add some context, while our sources really hammer these points, other analyses sometimes suggest different factors might be at play with recruitment too. Things like maybe a strong civilian job market or broader issues of trust in institutions. Though, granted, those points weren't heavily featured in the specific materials we looked at for today's deep dive.
That's a fair point. Different perspectives exist, for sure.
So shifting gears slightly to the process itself, how is this fight actually affecting getting the NDAA passed? Is it causing gridlock?
Well, based on our research, there's definitely frustration there, significant frustration with the legislative side of things. Republicans, in our sources, accuse Democrats of playing politics.
Hmm.
delaying the bill, limiting debate time,
Mm.
and trying to jam it through Congress without allowing for proper amendments or discussion.
Hmm. And what about things being added to the bill that aren't strictly defense related?
Yes, that's another major sticking point mentioned,
Yeah.
attaching non-germane items. A key example highlighted was the extension of FISA, the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act. That's the law about foreign intelligence gathering. Critics argued attaching that controversial FISA extension to the must-pass defense bill was a way to force it through, to sort of bypass the usual debate on FISA itself. And that kind of tactic, they say, just adds to the gridlock and the bad feeling around the whole process.
So when you step back, this deep dive really shows this fundamental clash, doesn't it? This ideological tension. Should the military be incorporating social agendas, or should it stay absolutely laser focused on national defense? And that debate seems to touch everything from who joins up to how they train to, I guess, the very culture of the armed forces.
It really does. And it leaves us with a pretty important question for you, the listener, to think about. As these debates unfold year after year over the defense bill, how do these internal shifts, how might they impact America's position on the world stage in a world that's already pretty complex? And maybe also, what kinds of demands or sacrifices are we implicitly asking of the people who actually serve in uniform through all this? Something to consider.